Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've got a good group of people on the line, so I very much appreciate all the recruiters and HR managers taking time out of their day. I know you guys are very, very busy people. So just to get started, this is the Recruiting with a Lean Team webinar. We're partnering with Caltech, which is one of our amazing customers, and obviously Recruiting Trends, which brought you here today. So for today's agenda, we're just going to be going through a couple of different ways, kind of moving through the recruiting funnel on different ways that Jan and Colin, today's speakers, have worked to improve and optimize their processes without necessarily that huge budget or a ton of resources that some companies may have. So here are today's presenters. We have Colin Forbes, who's an HR recruiter at Caltech, and we also have Jan Choi, who's a senior recruiter here at Jobvite. So with that, I really want to pass it off to Jan, who's going to get us started.
Thanks, Claire. In finding the right candidates, I know that most of you who are recruiters on the line, the biggest issue that we have, no matter how big or small the team is finding enough candidates in the pipeline. And enough doesn't always necessarily mean a high quantity of candidates. I know our goal as recruiters is to always present candidates with the relevant background, ideally keeping the quality high, but the quantity low. And we'll go over some ways in which I found to be very helpful in doing that. So why don't we get started? So, we have to always remember that majority of the best candidates already have jobs. We call them passive candidates. They're not going to be the ones who are going to be on job boards or necessarily submitting applications to any of your open job openings. So unless you have no issues at all filling your pipeline, we always want to keep passive candidates in mind and think about different strategies in which, we can attract passive candidates. And passive candidates are definitely the most in demand, and they're hard to sometimes seek out. But, fortunately, statistics show that about 74%, so about 3/4 of everyone in the workforce out there are open to a new job or at least hearing about an opportunity. So, we have to remember that passive candidates, they tend to be the strongest candidates. And because they're typically already successful, doing well in whatever role that they're in, they're not actively looking for another job. So we have to find a way to kind of tap them on the shoulder and get their attention. So, we always have to be thinking about strategies in which we can have a very compelling message and the best ways to reach out to them and making sure that those outreaches are personalized so they feel specifically sought after versus, a spam email that's gone out. A big part of this is also relationship building. Because passive candidates aren't necessarily looking for a job, even though they might not be open to hearing about your opportunity at this time, they might be in a future time if things might change for them down the road. So we want to keep in touch and build relationships with passive candidates that fit the background of what you're looking for. So, for example, the company that I'm at, Jobvite, I'm focused very heavily on the sales organization. And our company last year, we doubled in size, and a lot of that growth was in sales. And for our sales roles here, we're very, very specific in what we're looking for. And for me as a recruiter, that can make it sometimes very difficult. Our industry is very small. We want to hire people who come out of a background of selling applicant tracking system softwares and who are in a very specific city, who's in Chicago, who's in Raleigh, who's in DC. So to find to go after that very narrow pool of candidates meant that I didn't have a high number of people I can reach out to. So what we've done is, even if I'm not hiring in a specific city right now, I focus on building relationships with candidates. And a couple of years ago, we had a role open where we're looking to hire someone in Atlanta who have come out of the ATS industry. So it's a very, very narrow group of people. There were a couple people a couple years ago that fit the bill perfectly. To the point where we flew them out here, we ended up making them offers. They unfortunately, after much thought and consideration, declined the offer as they didn't feel personally ready to move on because they were passive candidates to begin with. However, I did keep in touch with them. We would exchange emails, every 6 months or so. I just checked in to see how things were going. And things definitely changed on their end over the last couple of years, and even on our end as a company. Unbeknownst to us, we rolled out an onboarding product that was in the same space as what they were in. And so we caught their interest in a way that we never had before. So we were able to re-engage them just recently and, working on, hopefully finding a place for them in the future here at Jobvite. So, we all know that good, smart people, they know good, smart people. So that can be a treasure trove of candidates that you always want to make sure that you have a strategy and are taking proactive measures to go after employee referrals. The number one thing that you need is to make sure that your company has a very solid employee referral program, one that has very specific outline of what the employee referral entails, what it doesn't entail, and to make sure it's compelling enough for all employees to want to get involved. I think our assumption or hope is that all employees would naturally want to get involved in helping build a company, but unfortunately the reality is people get distracted by their specific role and their function, and sometimes they're not always bringing their head above the water to think about, who do I know in my network that would be a great fit for my company. So, some of the things that has always been very successful is to really capitalize on the new hires coming in to a new company. They have a network that hasn't been tapped into yet, and a great place to get them started is the new hire orientation. This is before, they've started the onboarding process in their role, so they haven't been bogged down with meetings and different task items. So first day, new hire orientation, it's a great time to sit them down, educate them about the employee referral program, and show them how to leverage it and use it. Your company might have a requirement like what we do here at Jobvite and at Caltech, is that we want everyone to use their applicant tracking system, Jobvite, to refer people. So we'll take that time during the orientation to show them how to use the tool, the steps on which how they can refer someone in order to receive that referral bonus. And also, we also take, here at Jobvite, we have all-hands meeting every other week, and that's a really great time when you have the eyes and ears of the entire company to promote your employee referral program and also possibly highlight a very specific open position that you have. Perhaps have the hiring manager go in front of the company, share a slide of a couple bullet points of what they're looking for in the role, just to get it front of mind. It might be already posted on your company's careers page, but most employees aren't checking that on a regular basis. So if you have something like an all-hands or somewhere, some forum where there's going to be a critical mass of employees, that's a great time to be able to advertise open positions and remind people of the employee referral program. So one thing that we love to do is sit down with new hires and then also not only have them make a list of referrals that they would like to make, but have them look through their LinkedIn connections. So we'll sit next to them. If I know that I urgently have a revenue accountant position open, and we have, we're making hires in our accounting team, and these are the best people that would have a network of people that have worked in revenue. So we'll have them sit down and kind of work with them in looking through their LinkedIn connections to see who they might know, so that they can connect us with the candidate or introduce them to us, or perhaps ideally reach out to that candidate themselves. One thing that we've also found very successful is to have something that we call a recruiting blitz, and that's to make it fun. So it's not just for new hires. Even for employees that have been here for years and years, they forget that they have a great network. I know that I've hired I've made very difficult hires here at Jobvite, only to be surprised to find out someone here at Jobvite had already known them for years and hadn't even thought of them for that role. So to have employees engage, even if they've been here for a long time, is a great way. It's a great way to, get in touch with those employee referrals, and, would definitely suggest doing something like a department recruiting blitz, where make it fun, make it interactive. Open up a conference room, invite a department to come in, play music, incent them with snacks and drinks or catered lunch, anything to get them in there, and spend that time with them to sit down with them, go through the referrals, show them how to use LinkedIn, and look for referrals that way, because not everyone always knows how to use that tool properly. So on average, it takes several touches, 6 to 8, if not sometimes more, to generate a viable sales lead. Every sales rep knows that, and recruiters know that as well on our end for candidates. It's going to take several different touches, maintaining, building relationships with them, before we can move them into the recruiting process. And we have to have that same expectation, especially reaching out to passive candidates who are not looking for a job. Like I mentioned before, that relationship building aspect is very important, and you don't know over time, over the months, years, what things might change on their end or on your end. So, just keep in touch. You never know when your paths will cross and, when timing will change. And sometimes, emails do get missed. So even if you've reached out to them before and they don't respond, never assume that they're not interested. There's people that don't check their emails or their LinkedIn profiles and their inboxes very often. So we definitely encourage everyone to continue to reach out to them, have different personalized templates that you use for every time that you reach out, and make sure that you keep yourself front of mind for that, for when things might change on their end. And don't give up. As recruiters, we need to be persistent. It's easy just to take that first initial rejection or a response of I'm not interested at this time and, just want to move on and find new candidates. But I know for people who can be in shoes like mine, where we have a very specific small pool of passive candidates that we're working with, and there isn't always a new pool of people to draw from. So every candidate, even if they're not interested, keep in touch, set up follow-up tasks. And how I love to do this is use different tools, whether it's your applicant tracking system, your sourcing tool, to set up reminders for when to reach out to candidates. So even if they're not interested at this time, they're often open to being reached out to in 3 to 6 months. And that's a great time to check in if things might change on their end. And make sure that your personalized templates are compelling, that they're short, sweet, succinct, to the point, and that you have different flags for candidates for whether you want to follow up with them a second time, a third time, because your messaging will be different the second time you follow up versus the third time you follow up. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Colin at this time to talk about the application process.
And Colin, I think you might be on mute. So obviously I would love to have Colin speak on this. But some of the things that I know our recruiters do, and I know that Colin does at Caltech, is setting expectations. So making sure that you're meeting with your hiring managers. I know that, Jan, you do this. I remember doing it with some of my hires and making sure that we meet and talk about some of the characteristics that I wanted in a hire. Do you want to talk a little bit about that meeting?
Sure. So one thing that I do whenever I open up a new rec is sit down with a hiring manager and we talk about expectations. We call it an intake process, where everything about the rec, the SLA, the time agreement in which, we ideally want to get the role filled by, budget, looking at market data, so we know ahead of time when I'm starting the recruiting process what the budget is for the role and what the market data is for the role. So I'm going in prepared with that information, as well as what the key deal breakers are that the hiring manager has in the role. Often you'll get a job description that has 15 different bullet points of what they would like to see in the candidate, and often no candidate is going to have all 15 bullet points. So for me, it's extremely helpful when those bullet points are prioritized. What are the top 2 to 4 bullet points that are absolute deal breakers that you need to have in a candidate, and what are nice to have? What are the educational requirements? Are you willing to sponsor a work visa, or does someone already have to have eligibility to work in the U.S.? So things like that, we clarify with the hiring manager so that I can go in fully prepared to talk to candidates. I know what I'm looking for. I mean, if we're looking for new hires, new college grads, like what universities would we ideally want to hire them out of? Geographies. If we want someone, for example, based here in San Francisco Bay Area, is relocation an option, or do we want to have someone who's already here that can, start right away versus a time delay of having to move? So those are things that we kind of sort out with the hiring manager at the time that the rec is open.
Yeah, definitely. And I know from speaking with Colin, Caltech, which I apologize, I didn't introduce at the beginning, is a small IT consultancy firm in Texas. And so the pool of candidates is not necessarily huge, but Caltech has done a really great job of educating their employees about their expectations and about the job role, and very well defined, which is something that Colin and the HR manager, they're only a team of 2, but they've set aside time to really make sure that their job descriptions and that everything about their positions is really well figured out. And so that gives them an immediate introduction into the conversation with their hiring managers when they're opening up a new position. And just setting expectations, setting the stage helps so much, and saving time when, I'm sure recruiters, you guys don't have a lot of time. And remembering to iterate. So this is something that Colin was going to speak about. Caltech actually has a really long application process. They have an online application. They have a survey that they send out to candidates. They have a phone screen. They have a video interview. They have a video interviewing process. And it's something that it's kind of illogical if you think about it immediately. If you are looking for a really specific IT consultant, the pool of candidates is really small, and yet they have iterated and kind of done trial and error process to figure out what is the ideal application process for such a specific requisition. And that's really helped them. They haven't treated their application process and their entire hiring process as if it's set in stone or as if it can't be changed. And I think that's really helped them hire such great candidates and great people on their team. And too many candidates. This is always an issue. Jan was speaking about it before. You can have hundreds of candidates in your pipeline, but if they're all, that makes it even more difficult to find those great diamonds in the rough. And one thing that Caltech has done is implemented a video interviewing process, and we do that at Jobvite as well for some of our entry-level positions. And so it can help you, I don't know, Jan, maybe you have some thoughts on how video interviewing has helped?
So video interviewing, like I have seen during my time here at Jobvite, they're very effective for, like as Claire mentioned, more junior entry-level positions, and they're more effective also with active candidates, the ones that have applied through your website. If you're reaching out to a passive candidate who's not looking for a job, and then you send them a request to do a video interview, you're not going to get anything from them. If anything, they might be very turned off from the opportunity where, I'm not even looking for a job. I might be willing to hear about it, but I'm not going to do a video interview. They want that personal touch to hear about the opportunity. So video interviewing is a great way to whittle down a large number of candidates and to be able to go through, after they filled out the video interview to go through a large number of candidates in a very short time. Just watching a 2-3 minute video can give you a lot of information about a candidate that you would typically spend 30-40 minutes over the phone on. So we found that, like, for example, our entry-level lead generation reps, we hire them in high quantity, and they tend to be entry-level fresh college grads. So the application, for every time we post this role, we can easily have hundreds of applicants. So it's a good way for us to kind of whittle down that pool of candidates to a few that we'd like to then speak with and eventually bring on site.
Definitely. And one thing just to note, so Jobvite obviously has a video interviewing tool built into our ATS. Caltech actually uses a company called Spark Hire. But there's also a lot of free tools that you can use. Skype and Google Hangouts. I know that Colin at Caltech uses that as initially used that before they decided to upgrade to a paid solution, but it can really cut down on some of that time that you need for a phone interview. Moving on to once you actually have people past the application and into the interview process. Jan, do you want to take this?
Sounds great. So 47% of job thinkers think the interview is the most important factor. So you want to make sure that candidates have a really great experience as a candidate. And remember that during their time with them, it's a buying and selling at the same time. You're buying in a sense that you definitely want to further assess the candidate to see if they are a good fit for the company, for the role, but you're also selling the company as well. They are shopping as well. So you want to make sure that you're selling the great things about working at your company, the opportunity there, why this is a great fit for them, the culture, the people, opportunities to advance their career. You want to make sure that you're buying and selling, and making sure that the interview is key in your hiring team's mind, not just the hiring manager, but the entire interview panel. And it is definitely the most important experience that the candidate's going to have. And often the interview process on site will be just a few hours, so you have a short time to make a deep impact. Before you start the interview process with candidates, and ideally at the time that the rec is opened, you want to really establish a hiring team and each member's role. So I do that when I open up a new rec and I'm sitting down with the hiring manager. We clarify at that point, who's going to be doing the phone interview? Like, what are the topics that you want them to go over? Like, what's the measure for success during the phone interview? As well as the on-site interview, who's going to be part of this panel? Who do you want to be able to assess for what talent? So we establish that early on in the interview process. And also, if you're going to be testing for a specific technical skill, you want to ideally be able to share that with the candidate early on so they know what to expect, what the interview process is going to look like, how long is it going to be, and as well as assess the cultural fit as well. There's a lot of people that can functionally perform the roles of the duty, of the job, but you want to make sure that they're going to be a cultural fit in the company, that they're going to be a good addition to the team, that enjoy working with people, are a team player, and can live up to the company's values as well. So that's a key factor to making sure that someone is a cultural fit for the position. And making sure the interview feedback is quick and painless for everyone. We have an SLA with hiring managers, the recruiters do at the time that we open up the rec. But one thing that I have with my candidates is I have an SLA with them as well. I always tell them before we start the interview process, when you have a phone interview, I'm going to be sure to circle back and give you feedback within 24 hours. After an on-site interview, I let them know I'm going to get back to you. If they've been here Monday, I'll let them know I'm going to get back to you before Thursday, just so they know that they're going to be getting their feedback quick. They'll know. Nobody likes to be left wondering or hanging. If it's not going to be a fit, we let them know so we can close the loop with them. And if we need to bring them in for additional rounds or we're at a place we're not ready to make a decision, we make sure that we circle up with them within that time frame that we agreed on. And making sure that you have tools to collect the feedback is really important. At Jobvite, we just rolled out a mobile application not that long ago that's made it really easy for everyone to submit their feedback. So as soon as they walk out of the conference room where they met with a candidate, I often have people filling out their evaluation right there and then on their mobile phones. So I get it like within a minute from the time that the interview ends. And if you don't have an ATS with an app, one useful tip that we do, even with the mobile app that we have, is we have everyone sit around the conference table for about 15 minutes and just be able to discuss that feedback in person. For hiring managers, it's really helpful to have that dialogue with the interviewers and even between the interviewers themselves. Just hearing certain things that are shared about the candidate by someone else that kind of rings a bell to them, like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, or that reminds me of something that they said or did that might trigger, certain things about the interview. That's all great data points for the hiring manager to have. So we will talk a little about automating as much as possible, and I think Claire can start with that until we can get Colin on the line.
Yeah, definitely. And so this is one thing that, especially when you're constrained by time, making sure that you can automate as much as possible. So within our own ATS, and I know that this is a function of many ATSs, is scheduling those reminders for interview evaluations afterwards to ping people. I just interviewed someone the other day, and I got an email to remind me for interview feedback 2 hours after the interview. Jan is the hiring manager, so I also had her at my desk asking for feedback as well. Both are really helpful, but just that in case, you're off-site or you're hiring for a remote person, you can always check out the automation available in your ATS, or maybe just scheduling things in your Outlook as well. Make sure to tailor the interview as much as possible. So this is something that Caltech is really great at, in that every step of the process is really tailored to the requisition, but specific to the person as well. So one thing that Caltech does that's really great is that if they're hiring someone and kind of one of their evergreen positions is a help desk, kind of entry-level IT help desk person, if they're doing really well in that final interview, they'll immediately set them up with a real employee who is a help desk person to start shadowing them on the job and seeing what it's actually like. It not only gives the candidate a really personal connection to the job and gets them really engaged before they even started talking about the offer letter or logistics. It just gets them excited about your company and you're actually living and breathing in the job. It also gives you that last gut check to make sure that the candidate is the right fit for the position. Colin was telling us about, they've used this last interview, last informal shadowing, and actually seen that one of their candidates, they were so excited about them, and as soon as he sat down to start shadowing the Caltech employee, he started getting on his phone and talking about his hobby of building iPhone apps. And he was just so stoked about his app that it became very obvious right away that he was more excited about his side gig than he would be about the position. So they actually decided not to hire him. And that was something that they were able to see because they took that extra step to push along someone that they thought would be perfect. So kind of bittersweet, but I think better in the long term for both that candidate and the hire and Caltech. Another great thing that Caltech does is once they're hired, they pair those new hires with a mentor, specifically to help them grow at the organization. And it's something that Jobvite does as well. With all new hires, we have new hire buddies. And there's someone not necessarily that you work with day in and day out, but maybe even someone within a different team or different department that you can ask where's the bathroom, or where's the best place to park around the office, or what are the best, what's the best printer that doesn't shut down every time you want to use it. Those kind of logistical questions that aren't necessarily about the position, but they help you get more comfortable with the company. Something that Caltech does that takes it a little bit further is they actually pair all new hires with someone who's higher up in the organization, who's seen what it's like to be a help desk consultant and gone through the ranks. And so they can help them with a lot of the certifications that Caltech does to make them more comfortable and at ease at their new home away from home, essentially. I don't know, Jan, do you have anything to add about new hire buddies or anything of that?
I think that that's something that, especially in a large organization, a matrixed one, large campus, a lot of different people, it can be, very intimidating as a new hire. And what I've also seen very successful is to have a new hire like a buddy or a mentor who's not part of your immediate team or part of your department. It just gives them someone, where they don't have to feel embarrassed to ask like the silly questions when they're trying to just figure out how everything runs. So that is something that, I found very, very successful and would definitely, recommend, perhaps, having a buddy that perhaps one that's within the same department or team and then one in a different department as well.
And so we'll move on to our last section, which is covering metrics. One data point that we have been kind of shocked by and sharing a lot is that 75% of recruiters say they don't use data. I think data and recruiting metrics and reporting have all been buzzwords in the industry for a while now, but there's still a definite lag in people who say that they use data day in and day out. So this stat is coming from LinkedIn's recent infographics about why data empowers recruiters to hire better and faster. And it's definitely worth looking at if you're interested in seeing some trends with your peers. So we're going to go through just 3 metrics that we've picked out, that Colin and Jan picked out, that are really important. So they're going to be time to hire, cost per hire by source, and quality of hire. And talking about how you measure these things and how you maintain all of this when you're lacking in time, and why these are important to measure no matter what.
Metrics are very important here at Jobvite. It's really for us like a measure of success for us as a recruiting organization and as a recruiter. We can, with the metrics that we use, we can do things like measure time to hire. And why this is important is because it really lets us know if we're on track with a rec, and also if we need to invest more resources into a specific open role as well. I don't know if you have an applicant tracking system that does it, but for us, we use Jobvite, and it tracks certain things for us. The time to hire, as well as an estimated time to hire. So it can pull data from past recs that are similar that you have opened and filled, and it can give you an estimated time of hire. And moving on to the next rec, cost per hire by source. So this is something really important to us because for us, last year especially, we were experimenting with a lot of different sourcing tools. Sourcers on site, a sourcing company, investing in different tools such as LinkedIn Recruiter and Tailor, just name a few. We're investing in a lot of different resources to help us hire the best. And in doing that, one thing that we wanted to do was to find out which resources were effective and which weren't. So we added up all the expenditures that we had in recruiting, and then we just divided out by department to find a cost per hire per source. And we found, interestingly enough, that in some departments we were spending 3 times as much as we were in other departments to hire just as quality of candidates. And we really wouldn't have known this unless we were very intentional about collecting that data and really doing the math to find the metrics of what our cost per hire by source was. it was very interesting information to share with our executive management team as well as with our finance department, because it really helped us reshape the budget of what we want to do with our recruiting funds to make them go further for next year. And quality of hire. Ultimately, everything boils down to hiring great candidates. We're not spending this time and effort just to put warm bodies in seats, but we want to make sure that the hires that we make are successful in their roles, and we're not having to backfill them and reopen that rec over and over. So there's different metrics that can be tracked to measure something like this, the quality of hire. And one thing that we have done here at Jobvite that has been very successful is that we look at the hires from the previous year, and we also look at the performance review ratings of the top performers and the bottom performers. And we look for trends like, do they tend to be hired by specific hiring managers or have specific interviewers on their panel, or are they in certain departments? Is it people that tend to have this type of background or experience that come from this industry instead of that industry that tend to be more successful than others. So looking at the metrics of performance reviews of everyone that we've hired in the past year, it really gives us clues and insights as to what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and it helps us really adjust the level of expectation and different things that we're looking for in candidates to ensure that we're delivering, for us, quality products, which is a high quality of candidates to the hiring manager and to the business.
And so actually that's the end of our presentation. We'd love to take some Q&A. Apologies again. Sometimes technology is just not on our side. Colin's house lost power. So something that you definitely cannot predict. I promise you he would have been a fantastic presenter. But hopefully some of the stories that we've shared from CalSite and obviously from Jobvite has helped you get some new ideas on how to spend your recruiting time, how to move candidates faster through the pipeline and get buy-in from hiring managers. If you have any questions, we would love to take them for maybe 10, 15 minutes, depending on how many we have. We have till the top of the hour. We do have a couple of questions here, but if you have any more, just use that Q&A chat box at the bottom to type them in, and then I'll ask them out loud to Jan. So starting off, Jan, so we have a question. We have a question from Terry. What have you done to get a slow hiring manager moving? You talked about SLA, but what are some tips that you've had with hiring managers who just aren't reviewing resumes quick enough or getting feedback quick enough?
I face that very often, and more often than not, hiring managers, they're not getting back to us quickly because as much as they want to hire and fill the role, they are also very distracted and busy with the duties of their role and the function that they're in. And so I've always found that by emailing them or sending them resumes to the system for them to review, they quickly pile up. So I like to set up weekly or bi-weekly meetings with them where in person we can catch up on all the houseworking items that have just kind of housekeeping items that piled up over the past couple weeks. So if there's any outstanding resumes that they haven't reviewed, I take that time to review them one by one to get feedback about candidates that they might have spoken to, that they haven't just relayed the feedback back to me. And also it's a great time to calibrate as well. If there's candidates that have just not been a good fit or the resumes I'm sending just aren't really jiving with the hiring manager, it's a great time to sit down and recalibrate as well. So just having those as much as possible in person if they're in a different location, just to get them on the phone or just to have a certain amount of their time just kind of blocked off where that forces them to be able to focus on the recruiting task in front of them is a great way to just kind of push things along.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've had a couple of positions here at Jobvite that have been hard to fill when in marketing itself, and Jan has done a great job of working with the hiring manager to recalibrate and take a look at what specifically about the job description or about the application process could be optimized. And it's everything from testing out new job titles, testing out where you're placing them, obviously on different job boards, and how it's communicated initially. Jan has done a great job of trying to understand what the position is, but taking the time also to sit down with the hiring manager and make sure that her wording is what he has in mind. Sometimes there's just a disconnect and you just need that time to recalibrate. So we have another question from Stephanie, and she says, I work at a nonprofit, so we use job boards to post current openings. What job boards generate the best candidates? And so I'll have Jan talk about some of the job boards that we use, but I would definitely say, as Jobvite is a SaaS company in the Bay Area, it's a very different market and it's a very different audience. And so making sure that you're looking at your own data to see what's performed well or what could perform better, and checking in and seeing what the cost per application, the cost per hire has been for all those different job boards is a great place to start. And start testing. Testing out, maybe a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 depending on your budget. I'm sure it's not enormous in a nonprofit, but using that test budget to test out new job boards and see what the initial results are with the candidates that are coming in. Jan, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add on to that is that there are job boards that are specific to industries. So if you are working at a nonprofit and you want to attract people that have that background, to know what kinds of websites that people in your industry tend to visit, and often they have job boards as well. So when I was a few years ago, and I was working at a small company where we're trying to hire technical talent, we're hiring engineers. So we would post on the job board of GitHub or different technology websites that engineers tend to visit. So I think it's really and posting on GitHub is probably not going to be effective for what you're trying to hire, which is nonprofit candidates. So you just want to be sensitive to make sure that you're spending your dollars in a place that's going to get the most eyeballs of people who are in your industry.
Definitely. And I would also say, talk to some of the people that are in that department. Where do they find out their news, or where do they find out industry news? Are there any job boards available on those sites? Or are there any events or meet and greets or things that they enjoy going to that maybe that's where they've met some of their coworkers or their peers, and that can be also a good place to start. So a question from Susan. Have you ever used an assessment at the front end of the application to narrow your funnel to better quality, pros and cons? She's talking specifically about sales. Now, Jan, if you have experience either at Jobvite or maybe your past experience at LinkedIn and Okta.
So I hire specifically for the sales organization here at Jobvite. So, this question is definitely very relevant to my background. And in terms of using an assessment on the front end of the application process, I would say this is effective for active candidates. So if you have a lot of people that are applying through job boards or on your company's career page, and you want a way to kind of whittle it down very quickly, I would definitely recommend using a tool like video interviewing. It can give you a lot of information about a candidate in a short time. And also, I would say that would be very effective for entry-level roles. Unfortunately, when you get to more senior-level roles, there's a lot of things that take place during a conversation with them that you can't always just ask in a video interview process. So I would recommend something like video interviewing for active candidates. But if it's a passive candidate that you're going after, especially if they are in a very specific industry or background, then having a phone call would be the best way to be able to start that relationship.
Great. So we have a question from Gwen. When reaching out to passive candidates, Jan stated that she uses email to reach out at 6-month intervals. Do Do you find passive candidates are open to this approach? And she's at a small company with infrequent openings. How would she keep passive candidates interested?
Yes, so 6-month intervals, that's my preferred interval of time. You could definitely reach out to them more often or less frequently than that. And I found that passive candidates do not mind that approach. If anything, they like to keep their options open as well, especially if it's not going to take their time in the sense that you're not wanting to have a call with them every 6 months. It's just a reach out to kind of pulse check, an email to check in to see how things are going, how they stand, if they're willing and open to making a change or just hearing about the opportunity. I've never run across a candidate that has told me, don't contact me ever again. So if anything, I have people that ask me, can you follow up in 2 months or 3 months? I just want to get through the holidays. I just need to get through quarter end or year end. I can't really think about this now. Let's think up in X number of months. And in terms of keeping a passive candidate interested when openings are few and far between, I think that in itself, in that question, there's a lot of information that can keep a passive candidate interested in knowing that these roles are very unique in a sense that they don't come up very often. And when it did come up, I thought of you. So I think it's just making the candidate feel very special and personally reached out to and personally thought of as someone who could be a good fit for that role. So I think that's very kind of important to relay to that candidate. I know I use that to my advantage because we do, we're a small company. We do have very few openings, and knowing that, it can sometimes encourage candidates to want to speak to you because they know that, if I want to return back to this sometime in the future, this opportunity might not be available.
Definitely. So I think maybe we'll take one more question. It's slowing down a little bit. So if you do have any questions, definitely type them in quickly. But we can take one more from Christine. So what is your recommendation for recruiting field hires in a niche market? Sounds exactly like last year for Jan.
That's exactly what I do as well. I hire sales reps that work in a very specific small industry, and we have to hire them in very specific cities. So even if I find someone with a perfect background, but he or she is in Chicago, but we're trying to hire in Portland, they would just not be a fit. So it's a very specific niche market and a very specific geographical location as well. And I found that if I post up a job opening on a job board or even on our careers page, and I just wait for those few people to apply, that's never going to happen. So I need to be proactive in reaching out to them. And so I do that by pursuing passive candidates. I make the effort to find the people that I want who have the right background, the number of years of experience, who are in that city, and I reach out to them and start building a relationship with them. And that's what I found to be successful in finding those really hard-to-find candidates.
Definitely. And one thing actually, just for background, so 2015 was a really big year for Jobvite and for our recruiters, in that we hired, we probably doubled in size.
Doubled in size.
And so it was definitely a huge company-wide initiative. Recruiting was a huge company-wide initiative. And so I know that one thing Jan did was hire a sourcing agency. I don't know if that's within anyone on the phone budget allotments, but if you do have one of a really strong push to hire, make sure that you advocate for added resources when you really need them. Jen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. We did the math in terms of what it would cost us to hire a full-time sourcer or have a sourcing contractor or outsourcing the sourcing function altogether. So we found a small boutique company that was willing to source X number of candidates for a certain price, and what they did was help leverage the recruiting organization, which was 2 people on site, that they can kind of focus on creating as big of a funnel for us as possible. So we were able to kind of focus on all the other aspects of the recruiting cycle, including the relationship building, making sure candidates have a fantastic interview process. And I understand larger companies might have different resources and different people on the team that can take care of all those pieces of the recruiting cycle, but in a small organization, you wear a lot of different hats, and to hire large amounts of people in a short time, we did the math in terms of cost per hire, and we thought that would financially make sense for us to be able to outsource this function for a specific amount of time.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. We're actually hosting another webinar with ERE on Thursday. If you'd like to join, it's going to be covering recruiting metrics and the key recruiting metrics, so building off of that last section and really digging into how you pull them, how you understand them, and how to troubleshoot when you're seeing that you don't have enough candidates in the pipeline or your offer acceptance rate has dropped off randomly in the last quarter. So definitely take a look at that. You can Google it or you can type in that bit.ly link. It's case sensitive, which I'm realizing was not the best place when you can't click on that link. But definitely just Google the Invaluable Recruiting Metrics and you can find that webinar, and that's going to be Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Apologies again for the technical difficulties, but hopefully you enjoyed today's presentation. The slides and the recording are going to be emailed to you in the next 24 to 48 hours, so definitely look out for that and share it with your colleagues. Thanks so much, everyone.